Hello guys, and welcome to my first wrap up of the year. I do apologise for the dark tone. It is like 11:15 at night. I've just come in from a lovely evening of food, and I thought, let me get this filmed. So as usual, we go through the genre tracker and the demographics, then go through the sources and format, and then finally the reviews. 6 books I read during January were classed as fantasy, 2 were classed as non-fiction, memoir or poetry. In this case, I believe just non-fiction. 1 was historical, 3 were mystery, thriller or horror, and I believe in this case it was horror. 5 were aimed at a YA demographic. 1 was aimed at middle grade and the rest was aimed at adult, and all of them except for 1 were contemporary. And I believe I read 13 books in total, there around. So in terms of the sources, 1 of them I borrowed from the library. 11 of them were hauled at some point in the past, whether that was a recent past or a past. 7 of them were backlist books, meaning that they were older than 2020, and 7 of them were new released, so 2020 plus. In terms of format, 2 of them were NetGalley ARCs, 3 were borrowed from BorrowBox, which is an ebook kind of library service, and 9 of them were standard physical. So let's get into the reviews. So the first book I read, let me pick it up here, was a buddy read, my first buddy read of the year, and I read this with Kat from Kat's Reading Corner, and that is A Tale of Magic by Chris Colfer, which is the first book in the new spin-off series of the Land of Stories, and this is, I guess it's just like the Tale of Magic series. Currently I think it's just halted at a trilogy, but I think there's an idea that there might be like more books in the series eventually. So I won't go too much into depth in terms of the plot, but it is a sort of prequel to the happenings of the main series, which is the Land of Stories, and we're following some characters that might be familiar, some characters that are definitely new, but I'm kind of learning about a lot of the world on the way. I think it's best going into it knowing very little about exact time and place, because I feel like that was a lot of the enjoyment that I got from the book, kind of learning those truths kind of unfold as the story went along. So I definitely recommend going into this kind of knowing very little. So I ended up giving this a 5 out of 5 stars overall. It is YA fantasy, whereas The Land of Stories was aimed at middle grade. This felt a little bit older, felt like it was, well, it was definitely a chunky one, but it felt like it was aimed at a slightly older audience, but maybe on the younger side of YA, I would say. It is published by Little Brown and Books, and it was released originally 2019. This is not what I was expecting, and honestly, in the best way possible. I had such an amazing time reading this. It was engaging and exciting, and had such an unpredictable plot. Like every time I thought I was figuring stuff out, more twists and turns happened, but it didn't feel overwhelming. And as I say, the main kind of plot and how that unfolded and how I realized, this is where we are in the timeline or whatever, just it unraveled beautifully. There was a fabulous character development and origin stories, and there was just so much in this that I absolutely loved. There was one thing that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I just felt like it was very overtly like religious in a lot of contexts, and it felt kind of overkill a lot of the time. I wasn't really sure what they were trying to do there. It just kind of felt a bit much. Like, I don't know if it was trying to be used as like, this is what happens when you take religion and you try and use it to your own means. I got that if that was the case, but then it just kind of went too far with it. It just kept going on and on. I was like, okay, I don't really know what you're trying to do here anymore. But other than that, absolutely awesome start to a new series, and it was fantastic just being back in this world again. So I'm looking forward to picking up the next one, which will be in February, the 1st of February. The next 2 books aren't as positive. So the next one was Dissolve by Rich Shapiro, which unfortunately I gave a 1 out of 5 stars. It's aimed at adults, I would say, and in terms of genre, it's more like a speculative fiction. This is published by Too Far Media back in 2021. So originally I wanted to pick this up because, so I read it as like an ebook, and I wanted to pick it up because I had seen this and I downloaded the app like a couple of months ago, like a while ago actually, and it is kind of like this submersive experience where you have all this art and this media, and it kind of combines to give this new wave of storytelling, which to me sounded really like unique and interesting and like new and fresh, and I wanted to see what it was about. So I saw like an ad from like Sasha Alsberg, I believe, and she was raving about it, and I was like, oh yes, I have this app, let me go and read some stuff. And unfortunately it just didn't work. I don't have any positives unfortunately to say about this story or anything really, so I'm just gonna unfortunately run straight into my cons for this book. So the art and music was very jarring. It didn't really complement each other at all. So there'd be snippets where you'd open up the story and then you'd see like this little musical moment, and it didn't really add much to it, and the story itself was confusing to start with. Like, it just kind of threw you in and I didn't really understand what was happening, and then for much of the duration it carried on with that kind of vibe. Like, I just didn't know what was going on, and there were some unfavourable words, for example describing black hair as nappy, which didn't sit well with me, so unfortunately 1 star. However, I didn't want that to be just my only impression of it, so I picked up another book from that Too Far Media franchise, and this one was Arms from the Sea, again by Rich Shapiro, adult speculative fiction, published in 2016, and unfortunately this was DNF. It was actually my first ever conscious DNF in the history of ever, I do believe, so well done me for letting things go when it was no longer serving anything for me. So very happy at that, but also not happy because unfortunately I did not enjoy this book, so I did not want to finish it. I DNF'd it at page 28 out of 193, so I really tried, and I think I probably would have pushed on a little bit more had I not already read Dissolve and had like very low feelings about that. So yeah, I know it's quite early on. I didn't rate it on Goodreads or anything like that. I just wrote, you know, DNF'd at this part, this was the reasons why. Sort of positive that I got from this was that I found that the art and music seemed to work a bit better for this storytelling and added a little bit something. It added some texture, it added something interesting, and it worked a little bit more for the story than it did in Dissolve. But generally I had no connection whatsoever to the story or the characters. I had, again, no idea what was going on, and I was not interested enough to continue to find out what was going on. There was lots of random sentences strung together that made absolutely no sense. It felt like it was trying to be like pretty, and not even necessarily pretty, but just, you know, where it sounds intelligent to the point that it's pretentious, but it just doesn't make sense. And I was like, surely this isn't me. Like, I'm the first to admit, like, okay, I don't understand that, that's beyond my level, but this just didn't make sense, you know what I mean? So fortunately that was a DNF, and after that I shortly uninstalled the app. Next up, another 5-star read. So we had a bit of an up and down mixture of books, especially in the very first part of January, but that keeps it interesting, that keeps it fresh and quirky and cool. So I picked up Medusa, The Girl Behind the Myth by Jessie Burton, illustrated by Olivia Lomenek-Gill. So I had this on NetGalley, so I class as a NetGalley read, even though my eARC copy had expired, so I wanted to buy a physical copy anyway, and I'm really glad I did because this was bloody beautiful. To just read it, the experience, I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, so the stats for this. This is YA fantasy, mythology, retelling, published by Bloomsbury back in 2021, so it's a very, very fresh new release. Oh my god, I mean, the title says it all. It's Medusa. They're basically giving a voice to, you know, there's a lot of retellings coming out these days specifically about Greek mythology and giving voices and feminist voices to the voices of women that have been silenced, have been seen only as villainous or provocative or kind of like unworthy paying attention to the story, and kind of just rewriting that a little bit or taking a look at a different perspective and seeing, okay, how did they get to that point? And this obviously focused on Medusa, and oh my gosh, it did it so well. It was just a fantastic retelling in a feminist way of Medusa. I loved it. It had some exceptional art in here, and it was just so engaging and enraging, and I felt for Medusa and I felt for everything that the gods just put on her, and I just, it just, yeah, I loved it wholeheartedly. Let me quickly show you a little bit of the art, because there are some beautiful, beautiful spreads. Like, oh, how stunning is that? And then if that doesn't entice you enough, have a look at the naked hardcover. Beautiful, right? Like, so it kind of worked out. It was a blessing in disguise that I couldn't read it in my ebook form, because one, the formatting for NetGalley eARCs, especially when there's a lot of art, is never really the best personally, and two, I knew I would have wanted to purchase a copy, like a physical copy anyway, so absolutely loved that one. The only thing that I found irritating was that I felt like Medusa in her internal monologue would ask way too many questions, and a lot of them were rhetorical, but it was just like, am I doing this? Is this the right thing? And I kind of get it, because being in the head of a teenager girl, I used to talk like that to myself, like, am I doing this? I used to end everything in a question mark, do you know what I mean, whether it is internalized or external. And I think that's just the uncertainty of being that age, and you know, love, and obviously a lot of what Medusa's going through is probably making her very like confused and unsure, but just reading that constantly was a little bit annoying, just a little bit grating. But other than that, fabulous, 5 out of 5, awesome book. Next I read another buddy read. It was another NetGalley book, but I actually ordered the whole trilogy on Blackwell's. However, my copy didn't arrive in time, and I ended up finishing it, like the entirety reading on the ebook before it came. So I've got an untouched, unopened, unread, unthumbed copy of Sally Green's The Smoke Thieves. This really does look like an ARC copy to me, I don't know, but it says on the front, a princess, a soldier, a hunter, a traitor, a thief. So I read this as a buddy read with Deborah from Hills of Books on Instagram, and I believe we're going to be just going through the trilogy. So this one is setting up a new world, setting up a new story, a new land, and it definitely did feel like a setup book. So in Brigant, Princess Catherine prepares to marry a man she's never met, while her true love Ambrose faces the executioner's block. In Calidor, downtrodden servant March seeks revenge on the prince who betrayed his people. In Pretoria, Edion stands at crossroads, family and fortune one way, destruction the other. And in the barren northern territories, Tash is facing her demons, literally. As the kingdom's alliances shift and shatter, these 5 young people find their futures inextricably linked by a mysterious bottle of demon smoke, and by the unpredictable tides of war. Who will rise, who will fall, and who will unlock the secrets of the smoke? So this one I gave a 3 out of 5 stars. It is YA fantasy published by Penguin Random House back in 2018. So I'd say it's still relatively a newer release. I actually haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but I particularly absolutely loved the Half Bad trilogy by this author, so it had always been on my radar, and I'm glad to have buddy read this with Deborah. So I think we both ended up giving it around a 3 stars. I think she might have given it like a 3.5 stars, and as I say, it very much felt like a setup book, just because you were really kind of just getting the lay of the land, knowing that all these characters are eventually going to meet up, and it was kind of just the journey to that point, to where they were all going to meet up and get shit done. So it was really just setting up the story for the sequel, I would feel. Deborah made a really good point that on its own it kind of isn't very strong, but because you have all that build up, you know it's intended to be a trilogy, you're intending to carry on with this, it has that potential of the series being strong. On its own, nothing too special, which I could say is probably a little bit disappointing, because I love the Half Bad trilogy so much from the get-go. But still, you know, it's a new world, it's, you know, the author's feeling out a new kind of magical system. I can appreciate that. I think it's one that's to be developed over time and kind of get better as the books go on, of which they are all out now, I believe. So anyway, I enjoyed the Witcher vibes in this. From Tash's perspective, from the get-go, I was like, okay, I'm getting Witcher vibes. I was loving it, I was here for it, and I actually wanted more of those perspectives. I felt like the ending was absolutely fantastic, and again, it gave you that, right, you need to read the next book, you need to read it soon, because that's when everything was kind of ramping up, building up, getting the anticipation, the tension, seeing what was coming next. And yeah, it was an enjoyable, quick chapters, which really helped get through the story and kind of set the pace, especially during the high action sequences. It just helped kind of cultivate that urgency that I love to read in a fantasy. To begin with, there was an overwhelming amount of characters to follow. I think we're following about 5 point of views, but because the chapters are so short, in that regard, it acted as like a disservice, because it was like you was only getting little snippets of these people, and it felt like too many people were thrown at you all of a sudden. You was trying to learn the lay of the land, you was trying to learn, okay, who's this, whereabouts are they in this world. It was just a bit much for the first, like, I want to even say the first 100 or so pages, kind of feeling it out, because you weren't really getting much time of each individual character that was being presented to you. So that was kind of a bit of a backtrack, I would say. As I already mentioned, it wasn't really as captivating as I had hoped for the first book, and I think that's just going off my experience again reading the Half-Bad trilogy and absolutely loving it from the get-go. So I mean, it's difficult not to compare when you've enjoyed, you know, the author's other works, or you have opinions about the author's other works, but it's something that's almost inevitable. You're gonna subconsciously, you know, whether you intend to or not, compare other works to it, and this just kind of fell flat in comparison to that for sure. And yeah, I just wanted more information on the demon smoke, but again, I feel like that's definitely a plot that's going to be set up more for book 2. Nevertheless, I'm going to be continuing on with this trilogy. I'm excited to see where this story goes. Right, next up I have a non-fiction / poetry book, and this is The Hill We Climb, an inaugural poem by Amanda Gorman, and this one I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. It is published by Chateau and Windus and released in 2021. So this was a spoken word poem at the inaugural, I can't say that word, of President Biden. So I'll just give you a little bit of information. It doesn't say a lot on the flap here, but it says, on the 20th of January 2021, Amanda Gorman spoke a message of truth and hope to millions. Aged 22, she delivered a poetry reading at the inauguration of US President Joe Biden. Her poem, The Hill We Climb, addressed the country and reached across the world, a call for a brave future. So yeah, a very teeny tiny book, but keeping this review short and sweet, just packed full of very powerful and important words. Very much enjoyed this one. Alright, next up I finished The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, Daughter of Chaos by Sarah Reese Brennan, which I gave a 4 out of 5 stars. This is the sequel to the Season of the Witch, which I read last year, I think during Vampathon. I can't remember if I finished it during Vampathon or not, or if I picked it up after that, but anyway, this is the sequel to that. There are 3 books in this series. This is a YA fantasy published by Scholastic Limited. This one was published in 2020. And yeah, it's just a continue-on of The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. I never remember how like the timeline works in regards to the TV show on Netflix, but I enjoyed this. I felt like I picked it up at a very like timely time, because I was reading it like at the perfect moment, because it was just coming up to New Year's, and the whole point of this was really trying to avoid bad luck to come into the new year. And of course Sabrina manages to attract a bad luck demon, so that's kind of like the main point. And I was like reading this as the days were leading up to New Year's, and yeah, albeit I did kind of go over that a lot and ended up finishing it in like the 1st or 2nd week of January, but still it was cool to read it as that was happening. I was like, oh my god, I hope I don't attract a bad luck demon. But anyway, yeah, this was so much fun. I loved the banter with Nick and Harvey. You get so much scenes with them two in it, which sounds unlikely because obviously they're both kind of like fighting for a love of the same girl, but yeah, just seeing them interact with each other was so much fun. I felt like I was reading the TV show, and that was in the best way possible. It just felt very readable. I could just hear the characters' voices in my head. I absolutely loved that. It was just so much fun. So even though I really enjoyed the interactions with Nick and Harvey, sometimes I felt like they did like a disservice to Nick, because they made him sound like such an idiot, like so clueless on things. And yeah, I get it that it was more of the mortal ways that he was like, I don't have a clue, but they made him sound so like dopey with it, which was unfortunate. But other than that, great read. Alright, so after that I decided to finally start a rather lengthy comic book series, and that is Fables. And I believe this was what inspired the video game The Wolf Among Us. But this is volume 1, Legends in Exile. This is by Bill Willingham, and it's like illustrated, and like the text and everything is all by Lan Medina, Steve Lialana and Craig Hamilton. This is adult fantasy, published by Vertigo back in 2002. So, who killed Rose Red? In Fabletown, where fairy tale legends live alongside regular New Yorkers, the question is all anyone can talk about, but only the big bad wolf can actually solve the case, and along with Rose's sister Snow White, keep the Fabletown community from coming apart at the seams. So yeah, we're basically thrust into this world where, and we learn it kind of here and there throughout the first volume, these fairy tale classic characters have been forced to inhabit modern day New York, and they kind of live on the down low. They keep their community very tight knit, but they're still like well established within the mundane world. They call the regular humans Mondays, but they're still operating like their magic and their know-how at a secret kind of base level. It feels like a very detective-y noir plot at the thick of it, but yeah, it's got lots of different threads that kind of unravel eventually together. So I love the detective plot, and it's not really one that I would naturally gravitate towards, but it just worked well. It kind of reminded me of Grimm and like Once Upon a Time, although I've never seen that show, but it gives me those sort of vibes. I also loved learning a little bit more about these interpretations of the fairy tale characters that I've grown up and loved with. You can tell that I enjoy fairy tale stories, what with A Tale of Magic that I talked about at the very start of this video, and this, like, I enjoy that. And then obviously retellings, because with Medusa, that is my jam. I love that sort of stuff. But yeah, how they came to this world, I was very intrigued, and I liked kind of the little snippets that we got of that origin there. However, it's not my favourite art style, and that's like the only thing that I found kind of annoying me, I guess I would say. It's difficult, isn't it, because it's very individual, and oh, I've still got a bookmark in here. Okay, it's very individual, and you just, you're with it throughout the duration, so it's difficult if you're looking at the art and you're not like loving it the most. It makes it hard sometimes to push past it, especially sometimes when you find that the outside cover does not match the inside. It's like very jarring, and you're like, I don't like it. But no, I mean, it's just not to my taste. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just I prefer a different art style. It didn't stop me from enjoying it this time around. So yes, very good story, very good introductory, very intrigued to continue on, and I actually picked up the second volume. Later on you'll see in the video. Next up, time for a classic, and a teeny tiny one at that. This is The Tooth by Shirley Jackson, which is a collection of 5 short stories, horrifying stories actually. I actually gave this a 1 out of 5 stars, unfortunately. This is classic horror short stories published by Penguin Modern Classics. This particular collection was bound together back in 2011, and I mean, this was my first foray into Shirley Jackson, and it just wasn't mind-blowing. I had hoped that You've Always Lived in the Castle or The Haunting of Hill House would be the first one, but through different events this turned out to be the one, and it wasn't one that drew me in, unfortunately. It definitely had an easy writing style, and I would still like to try her long-form books, such as the ones I've just mentioned, but it wasn't scary. It fell flat. I didn't really care about any of the characters, didn't care about any of the stories, no connection whatsoever. Felt like it was a bit of a pointless read, unfortunately, but as I say, it's not put me off picking up her other works, because I've heard great things about them. I've wanted to try them for so long. This just unfortunately didn't hit that for me, and that happens, and that's okay. But like we have with the other books, once I have a downfall, I have an exceptional read. And another 5-star book is The Sister Who Ate Her Brothers and Other Gruesome Tales by Jem Campbell, illustrated by Alan D'Souza. This was awesome. This is another collection of short stories, creepy stories, and it just did it so much better to me than Shirley Jackson's one did. I forgot her surname, I do apologise. So this one I gave a 5 out of 5 stars. It's middle grade horror, fantasy, short story, fairy tales, retellings, so many genres it can fall under. Published by Thames and Hudson in 2021, so another newer release. And it's basically 14 short stories inspired, or retold really, of folklore and fairy tales and gruesome stories from all over the world. So you've got some from like Japan, Ireland, Russia, South Africa, lots of different places, and it was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Fantastic storytelling in here. I feel like the way that Jen Campbell weaves the sentences together is just very Moorish and eerie and just perfect. It reminded me of Grisly Tales for Gruesome Kids. I used to love that TV show. I used to watch it on CITV, and that's the vibe it gave me in book form. I also really enjoyed the spin on the stories, because not all of them were like true to original telling. Even though with folk tales and fairy tales, a lot of them are oral traditional stories told and told and told, and then eventually written down, so you never really know what the original true story was. But I liked the different spins that Jen added to them, and then her author's note sort of thing at the back that explained why she did this and what different parts meant to her. I really did enjoy that and appreciate it. And yeah, the art in here also was absolutely fabulous. Again, let me show you a random picture. It's fully illustrated throughout. Like, so you've got like these illustrations, sorry, all around like as the border, and the design is very specific to the story being told. And then you have these full page spreads of a scene that's being described in part of the story. So yeah, absolutely loved this. I'm definitely going to want to pick up some more, specifically Jane Campbell's middle grade, but I would like to try her other works as well. But the middle grade is definitely calling to me, and I'm excited to try out more from her. Alright, so next I have another book that I borrowed through the library on my ebook service, and that is What is Black Lives Matter by Lakita Wilson. And I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It's aimed at YA and is non-fiction. It's published by Penguin Workshop and it released in 2021. So it's basically a very concise and factual overview of the Black Lives Matter, and it gets to the point. It doesn't shy away from any of the harsher realistic facts and you know, traumatic experiences that have happened to make this movement what it is, but it's also not trying to give you like, you know, torture porn or anything like that. It's just telling you how it is. This is why it happened. This is what sparked the movement. And here we are. And I enjoyed it for that. There were some illustrations in it. There was some weird bubble-headed character design. I don't know what that was about, but the art inside the book itself was nice. So yes. Then I had a read-along, so technically another buddy read, but it was like a group read-along through Illumicrate. I didn't join in on the Discord just because I don't think I have a Discord account. If I do, I don't use it, so I just kind of read it at my own pace, so I didn't know like how they were breaking it up for the days or whatever. But they were reading A Marvelous Light by Freya Marske, which came out I think in the December Illumicrate book box will do, the subscription service. And yeah, unfortunately this didn't hit the level that I wanted it to hit. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. It is adult. It is most definitely adult. Took me a while to realise that, but it is adult. Historical fiction and fantasy, published by Tor. The first Tor book I think that I haven't like head over heels loved, which is quite sad. I didn't even realise it was Tor. It doesn't feel like their usual vibe. I don't know. And it released in 2021. So we are in like an Edwardian London. We're following young Baronet Robin Blythe, who is in a bit of a situation. He's found himself in this position, this job role that he knows nothing about. He's basically thrust into this world of magic. He is dealing with the special complaints and concerns liaison called Edwin. They hate each other. Edwin doesn't think he deserves that job. Robin doesn't know what this job really is. He's like, what the heck's going on? And it's basically like another detective story in a way. It's a murder mystery. It's an awakening of realising there's more to the world than Robin had originally known. It's also very LGBT, which I loved and was like my only favourite part about it, to be honest. And yeah, rich people doing rich things, killing people, a lot of stuff happening. So yeah, I absolutely loved the steamy scenes. I wasn't expecting it. I heard it was going to be some sort of LGBT vibe, and I was like, oh, okay, let's see what's going on. Wasn't expecting the hardcore like sex scenes, pretty much. Yeah, that got me. There were some great conversations though on consent, and not only consent within the bedroom, but consent within the use of this magic system and how it works, and how you have to kind of set up a contract between the two magicians, set out the rules clear, otherwise it's like against the ethics. I don't know if it necessarily means that the magic won't work, but it's against the ethics basically, and that's just how the magic works. And also that really fed in to the greater plot as well about what people were trying to achieve, which was interesting. So I did enjoy that, but I felt like the story itself for me was just way too drawn out. It didn't need all this preamble and fluff. It was just a bit over the top. It didn't really keep my interest in that way. It just felt too lectury, which kind of works for Edwin, one of our main characters, who definitely has that lectury teachery vibe. He's only comfortable when he's kind of preaching his knowledge. Other than that, he's very much like in his self, and he's trying to protect himself from the hurt and the teasing and just the outright bullying that he's had to face all his life. So I get that, but having to read that was just a bit much for me. It just felt dry, you know. And I didn't really care much for the characters. I mean, I say that, I guess I kind of enjoyed Edwin and Robin, kinda, but I didn't, not enough for me to really want to continue on, unfortunately. I don't know how long this series is, if it's planned to be a trilogy, a duology, a longer series, I'm not sure. But I probably will not be picking up the rest of the books, unfortunately. I mean, I definitely won't be going out of my way picking up a book. If it was in another subscription service and I had it to hand, I'd probably get around to it, but I'm not really interested. Gutted though, because it's absolutely stunning. It just wasn't my sort of book, unfortunately, and again, that happens and that's okay.
What up? Just chiming in there to say that I have since looked into the sequel and it seems to be following his sibling and another kind of story arc, yet feeding into the great scheme of the narration. So may check it out. Following different characters might be a different vibe. I don't know.
Okay, we're getting to the last two books now. As I mentioned earlier, I picked up the second volume of Fables, which was Animal Farm. So we already know a little bit about what this setup is, this story in general. Won't go into too much depth. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. This one was published in 2003. I really enjoyed the mirroring of Animal Farm, like by George Orwell, and seeing like the conversations on a society and socialism. I think it's socialism is the right word. Correct me if I'm wrong. And just kind of justice and getting your voice heard, but then also the themes of violence and war and like the conflict between the two. It was just well done in such a short adapted time, you know what I mean? It had a more serious plot, I feel like, than the first one. The first one was kind of like a little fun detective murder mystery that wasn't really that deep, but this one had a lot of themes in it that were something that you could pick apart and think about a bit more in depth, which I enjoyed. And it also looks like there's more to come from their lands and the origin of why they moved out, and hopefully going back and getting those lands and getting that control back. It seems like that's going to be like a bubbling plot under the surface, which I'm very excited to see kind of pan out. So that is volume 2 of Fables. And then lastly, I have Lemsis's My Name is Why, and I've been wanting to read this for so long. I actually recently, I think before Christmas, watched a Q&A talk that my work got online tickets for, and I very much enjoyed it. It was nice to kind of learn more about the man behind this, because I knew a little bit about this but I hadn't read it at the time, obviously. So he was just talking about his charity work and all that he does for the community and stuff, and it was just really nice to kind of see how humble he is. And so it kind of made it hit different when I read his sort of origins and how he came to be the person he is today. So basically Lemsis grew up in care. He was fostered for like 12 years and then basically chucked into a care home, like, we don't want you anymore, you don't fit our mould. He knew nothing about his heritage, he knew nothing other than that foster family life. So getting thrown into a children's home was just so distorting for him, and it really kind of shook up his life. And he goes into depth about all of that, how the care system basically failed him and hid all the information that he needed to know just for his right, you know, as a human being. They kept from him, treated him poor. Oh my god, it was amazing. The way it feels like an investigative piece of writing and journalism, but also a memoir, it just was perfectly balanced, I feel. Super vulnerable, super raw, but also explaining on the text and the points and what can be better. And oh, amazing. Very much enjoyed this one, and possibly would say this is probably, this and A Tale of Magic maybe are my favourite books from January. Yeah, if I'd have to say just straight off the bat, because I haven't really properly looked into it, I would say those are the two. So I really hope your January for reading has been super successful. I'm quite chuffed with the way my first month of the year has gone reading wise. Very happy with these books, and hopefully taking and channeling that energy into the coming months. But yes, let me know what you read, what your favourite, maybe least favourite book of January was, and I shall speak to you in another video soon. Bye!